We've got a brand new order card, which is really interesting for standard as well as premium. We also got some new Cray Elementals, which are very interesting, that can be utilized in many different clans and many different archetypes. And we even got some new information for the upcoming Granblue supports that will have something to do with a brand new marker. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another Cardfight update, and today in this extra edition of Cardfight update we've got a bunch of new cards revealed to us and some extra information concerning upcoming support sets. And let's start with the new information that we got for the upcoming VBT09 Butterfly and Magic Under Moon Shadow set. What we learned for the upcoming set is that the new Granblue support within that particular support wave will have two different builds, or two major builds that will come out of that set. Of course, we got the VR build with the upcoming Night Rose, but also a deck that can be built with the triple Rs and lower rarity cards that will have something to do with a brand new marker card. And what this means, we currently have no clue. We only know that on the box art itself, when they gave us the general information what the box will contain, in what rarities and whatnot, it also states that it will contain special parallels, which are the SPs and everything else, but also something about a marker card, one marker card. And they usually don't state on the box itself or on this particular image when they contain just normal force, protect, and exile markers, as that's just a given. So the fact that they added this on top of the art itself explains that we're going to get a new type of marker. And this new low rarity Granblue deck will work with that marker. So it's going to be a Granblue exclusive marker. But is this going to be a different type of protect marker that's exclusive to Granblue? Or does this mean that they use the word marker for their new mechanic? So it's not tokens, it's not something like a equip gauge, but it utilizes a marker card or a marker mechanic to do something different. For now, we have no clue. This is the only information that we got. We're going to get two different builds. One is a low rarity build, one is the VR build, and that low rarity build will do something with a new marker card. And what this new archetype is, we also have no clue. This could potentially be something with the old Legion pair, as we've seen with the new Metalborgs within Dimension Police. So we could see something with the Legion done in Granblue. Or it could be that we're going to see 7 Seas and Night Mist maybe return in Standard as well. But for now, it's all speculation, and this is all the information that I got for you guys. So you Granblue players can now speculate and probably theory craft away for the next couple of weeks or month or so, until we actually going to get the reveals and probably confirmation about this news, what it actually means and what this new mechanic will do. So yeah, it's gonna be a very exciting few weeks for Granblue players until we actually know what this news means. But besides this vague information, we also got some actual card reveals. So we have some actual data and news to grab our hands on and have a better understanding of what we can expect. And we start off with two new cards for the upcoming Silver Petal Dragonflame set. And one is a new deleters for Link Joker, and this is a very interesting deleter card, as we've got Screening Deleter Idoga. And its abilities are Auto Vanguard Circle. When placed, cost counter+1 and discard a card from your hand and delete your opponent's Vanguard. So we've got once again an unwrite delete effect. This is basically the card that will replace the old trial deck card, as that was an act ability, counter+2, is way too costly. This is just one counter+, so it's a lot cheaper. Sure, you discard a card, but I think you don't really mind it as it's an on-place, meaning it also works in premium alongside with Great Ulls. So you can now run 8 Great Freeze that have an unwrite delete effect and also attain a force marker, so that's pretty nice for premium. But it also got a second ability, which is really interesting. Its second ability is Auto Vanguard Circle. When placed, cost Soul+1 and your opponent cannot be released from delete during his or her next end phase. So this is a Omega delete effect. Is this strong? Probably not, as the problem with delete is that just by a generic game mechanic you can counter it. Just write and it's solved. This does not prevent your opponent from writing, and in premium they could just try it and also reverse the effect of the delete effect. So also not really that great. The upside is, however, if you're up against a particular deck that it doesn't utilize a lot of grade 3s and only maybe runs 4 grade 3s, then this could be very detrimental to that build, as they might be out of their rights and they're stuck. And if you can utilize this grade 3, you can keep them stuck, because the upside to this Soul Blast is that it's effectively paying the cost of delete beforehand. And so you could see that it's on place on the Vanguard circle skill. It changed its main Vanguard skill from a counterblast discard into just a Soul Blast. So it's pretty good value if you look at it in that sense. And what's also nice is because this is a rearguard skill, it allows you to actually utilize this card as a support grade 3 right target to something like Great Ol, as you don't mind to right Great Ol and then call this thing to the rearguard circle, as you have both effects active. So I think this is a really interesting card for the leaders. Probably not the strongest of all cards, but it's interesting to have an Omega delete effect, and it might come into play in some scenarios. But we have to wait and see if it actually is viable and will change the leader's deck at all. It's probably just going to be replacing the trial deck grade 3 just because its delete effect is cheaper. But that's probably where its main use will end in most scenarios. Now, the card that we got revealed today was a brand new order card for the upcoming Silver Petal Dragonflame set. And that's this grade 3 order card. Clear Frame Curse Cleaning Whirlpool. Really interesting name, but also a very interesting skill. As its skill, and this is a normal order card, so it's a main phase ability, choose one of your circles, unlock the locked card on that circle, and stand the rear guard on that circle. If you unlocked or stand, draw a card. Alright, so this wording might sound strange as it states, choose one of your circles, unlock that card on that circle, comma, and stand that rear guard on that circle. But when you unlock something, it will immediately stand itself. The reason why it states that is basically this card has two applications. It can unlock a card, or it can restand the card. And because this card can do both those things, it has a wide range of applications in as well as standard, as well as premium. Because in premium, you can use this to counter Link Joker with their whole lock thing with Chaos Breaker and all that stuff. But you can also use it to counter Mega Colony with their stun effects, as this can just restand those cards that are stunned, which is really nice. And it also doesn't target those units, as it says choose one of your circles. So something like, I believe, the old Dark Phase that prevents you from choosing those units, you circumvent those effects as it chooses the circle and not the units themselves. But in standard, this also can counter Mega Colony to some extent, but not many cards in Mega Colony actually stuns your opponent. And it also will not counter Link Joker, as Link Joker will lock their own stuff instead of the opponent's side. But what it can do in both formats is that it can potentially circumvent certain restrictions put on cards that don't allow them to restand in the stand phase. A good example is Brutal Jack. And Brutal Jack, of course, has his own ability that it can rest 2 cards and then stand himself, but maybe in some scenarios you don't want to rest those cards, or you can't rest 2 cards. This card then can just restand Brutal Jack. But there are other cards that have a similar restriction that they can stand themselves, and I cannot come up with a card on the top of my head, but I believe there was not too long ago a card released with the current sets that had a restriction in that sense. And if not, at least this card could potentially restand any card, whatever restriction put on top of that. But another aspect of this card is that it also works with the whole Beast DT engine of attacking in the main phase, because you can attack in the main phase, they hit, and they keep themselves rested. Then you can utilize this card to restand them again, so you have another attack. So this card could potentially be a free restand, because you also draw a new card, so it replaces itself, which is really nice. So for free, you get a potential extra attack out of that, which is actually pretty good. But another application of this card is that Link Joker in Standard can utilize this card to get immediate value out of their lock effect. Because the whole lock effect in Standard right now is that it's actually a delayed plus in most cases, because you lock something on the field, at the end of the turn it's unlocked, and then you have that unit and they can utilize this the next turn. Only with Messiah VR, you could potentially unlock them in mid-battle and you can multi-tag that way, but that's a pretty late game skill, as you need to have a grade 3 in Soul. This card allows you to unlock those units a turn earlier to get immediate value of that. And some cards will activate on effects that are cards that when they lock and when they unlock, and that might play into this card, as that can then activate those cards more efficiently or at more times in a single turn. So where this skill in basic sense is very simplistic, it basically unlocks a card or resends a unit and then draws a card back, which is pretty good. It replaces itself, but also unlocks or resends a unit, so that's already pretty good value. But when you look outside of the box with this card, then suddenly it has way more applications than just unlocking and resending units, as it can synergize with certain archetypes or certain strategies within Link, Joker, Messiah, or maybe even Beast Deity, and maybe even other decks that utilize cards that have a certain restriction on top of them. And it also, but this is really scratching the bottom of the barrel here, as it could potentially work with the reverse cards in Premium for all the clans, as they unlock your own units to utilize their main ability, but then you can use this card to then unlock them, because not every clan has an unlocker card available to them, and this card is basically that for every clan, but unlike all the other cards, it draws into another card, so it replaces itself for that lock effect, which is pretty nice, if you ask me. Now, the other cards that we got revealed to us were new cards for the Premium Collection, and we have two new Grey Elementals, which are really interesting, as we've got this Grade 1 Elemental, Heat Elemental, Huang. And its ability is Continuous Rearguard Circle. All Vanguards must attack the Vanguard as much as possible. So this basically forces your opponent to ram into your Vanguard with their Vanguard, so damage denying becomes a lot tougher, as if they're damage denying you, that means they're also not drive checking, so they're not gaining pluses as well. So this card can combat that strategy. So depending on what build you are, and if you're really dependent on your counterblast, this could basically help you to have that counterblast on a more consistent basis, or in the case that you don't get that counterblast, you deny your opponent some advantage. So that is a really interesting effect. But another interesting application what comes up of this card is that some cards can abuse this effect, where your opponent is forced to attack with their Vanguard into your Vanguard, as certain effects work with their units onto the rearguard slots themselves. That might be something with intercepting or activating when Vanguard hits Vanguard. A good example is a Gear Chronicle Grade 2 that we've got from the last support wave, the Astral Force, that when it intercepts, it basically is a PG, and then you can bind something from hand as well. This card could synergize with that Grade 2 to basically have multiple PGs onto the field, and then you can recall the Grade 2 from the drop zone with the Grade 1 promo that can then draw back from hand. So there are interesting interactions you can do. The only problem here is with all these other effects that might interact in a similar vein, is that it only prevents your opponent's Vanguard from attacking into your rearguard. So all their rearguards can still beat into your rearguards. But then again, if they do that, they call rearguards to the field, which means you can potentially damage deny them. So there's an interesting back and forth coming from this card, and I'm curious how good it will be in Premium, if it will actually be played and will not be played, but it's at least an answer to potential damage denying strategies to some extent that might or might not toolbox Grade 1s. Another interesting Grade 1 that we've got that could potentially be used in certain builds is Air Elemental Bufu. Bufu ability is Continuous Rearguard Circle. During your opponent's turn, if 3 or more new cards were put into your damage zone this turn, you may bind this unit instead of reveal the top card of your deck into your trigger zone for your damage track. So what this basically means is when you already got a multiple damage in a single turn, you can then, if you need to damage check again, so you need to get a damage, you can just bind this card instead and basically have paid for damage. So if your opponent swings in with like 4 criticals, you take the first 3 damage, and then on the 4th damage, you bind this card and you're done. So this is different than certain PG skills or special intercept skills that can prevent the damage, because this card can interact even within a skill that does multiple damage in one go. So you still take maybe 1 or 2 damage, but then the 3rd or 4th, whatever, once you hit this threshold, can then be changed into just buying this card. So it has some more applications to that than your typical special intercepts that can block something, like the thing that I explained with Gear Chronicle for just now. But clans like Angel Feathers can really abuse this card, as they can give themselves multiple pseudo damage during your opponent's turn with rescue checks and extra damage effects with the G-Guardians, or cards that swap themselves into the damage zone and then out. A good example is, of course, No Shell. No Shell can keep swapping cards in and out of the damage zone while they take damage, so they can abuse this grade 1 to just negate a lot of damage at the same time. But another interesting thing about this card is that this card somewhat counters Gize, because what Gize does is it deals you 5 damage in one go. So that means you will fulfill the condition of this grade 1. So if your opponent is going into Gize, you can call maybe 1, 2, 3, a couple of these great air elementals onto the board, and you can negate a couple of damage from Gize, which means you survive another turn. Which is really interesting. This might or might not be useful depending on what deck you are. Something like Granblue can just resurrect them from the drop zone to prepare for a Gize turn, and then next turn kill the Gize player if they want to do so, depending on what their strategy is. So, and of course, Gear Chronicle, with the fact that this unit goes to the bind zone, might be able to abuse this a little bit, as they can fetch them back from the bind zone and call to the field. But then again, how much damage can Gear Chronicle take? Because you need to get 3 or more damage in one turn. So that's the only problem with this card, that the fact that you need to get so many damage in a single turn means that most clans might not be able to utilize this. The best clan, of course, is Angel Feathers, and then it's potentially a strategy against Gize if Gize ever gets a comeback. But who knows? It might get a comeback, it might not. It all depends on what the cards tell us. Now, with the Cray Elementals done for that set, we also got a brand new Stride. We've got the Stride for Tachikaze. And we are actually very familiar with this Stride, as we've got Destruction Tyrant Grunteraptor, or as I like to call it, the isekai version of Angerblader. Because Angerblader was basically trucked with a meteorite into premium as it reincarnated as this Stride card, because its abilities are basically the same, as his first skill is Auto Vanguard Circle. Once per turn, when your rearguard is placed from hand, you may put 3 cards from your drop zone face down as an equip gauge for that unit. That is really, really good, as that means you can give any unit immediately 3 gauges. Something like a Sweeper Akrokanto is immediately completely charged. That thing is ready to rumble. And because you put them from the drop zone under your units, you don't minus on your deck, which was an issue with the equip gauge for Tachikaze. But another thing is, you don't accidentally gauge triggers, which was another issue for Tachikaze. And because we have cards that, like the R grade 2 Savage Academian, that can potentially recall units, this effect is somewhat of a resurrection effect, just like Granblue, because you can put a potential card that you want to have on the field from the drop zone into a gauge for units, or under the Academian, then utilize the Academian to then call it out onto the field, which is really interesting. This could be a potential interaction, but mainly it will be utilized for something like Sweeper Akrokanto to give it all the gauges that it needs to wreck house. But it also sets up for its second ability, as its second ability is Auto Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, cost counter +1, turn a card from your G-Zone face up, stand all of your rearguards with 3 or more equipped gauges each, choose the same number of your opponent's rearguards as those units, and retire it. So this card is basically the same on attack, counter +1, only now also G-Flip, which is pretty good, to restand all units with 3 gauge. That's basically what Angerblader did as well, only Angerblader was limited to 3 units, but it also gave a +5k to the front row. But Grunteraptor also destroys your opponent's field, and it can potentially restand more units, so you could potentially restand like 4 or 5, maybe your entire field, if you could set it up with enough gauges. And with the fact that you already get 3 gauges on the first unit you called, is basically a good setup. And then with cards like with Smilodon, Super Akrokanto, Bomb Raptor, and all the other cards, you could potentially set up an entire board out of nowhere. And Bomb Raptor also synergizes nicely with its effect that it retires the field, because then you can put another gauge underneath it because it's retired something, and you can give it a lot of power. So if Bomb Raptor was the unit that you called and gave 3 gauges, then it will have 4 gauges and an additional 20k power when it goes for the second attack. So as you can see, this card opens up a lot of different plays for Tachikaze, it can be a very high tempo aggressive play, just like Angerblader, or it could set up something interesting with a resurrection skill with Savage Academian, where you can recall units from a drop zone, which is pretty unique for Tachikaze in itself. And this is actually a stride which I think Tachikaze really needed, because most of Tachikaze's strides were really Vanguard centric. As you retire your units, you do your stuff with your Vanguard, and that will apply the extra pressure, and you have potential rearguard swinging with your rearguards, but that's basically because those rearguards enable those effects. The Vanguard doesn't really do that. Now they have a stride which is really rearguard centric, where it allows you to restand your potential entire board. So with the previous stride, with the upgraded Dogma, that as a Vanguard centric restander, and now this stride as a rearguard centric restander, Tachikaze's G-Zone is basically set. They are ready for any type of scenario, and they can come swinging out of the woodworks with no problem. So I think Tachikaze players are very happy with this Angerblader version 2, as it's really solid. But that's basically all the reviews that we got today. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of these new cards for Tachikaze, as well as the new Cray Elemental and the new Order card, as well as the new Deleter for Link Joker. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below about all these cards, as they're very interesting, especially the new Cray Elementals, as there is a discussion with every Cray Elemental of what can it be utilized for, which insane combo is possible. As per definition of these Cray Elementals, they are usable by anybody. So there are definitely interactions and scenarios that I'm overlooking, as I'm not an expert for all 24 clans. That's literally impossible. So let me know all your insane combos and interactions that I definitely overlooked in this video in the comment section down below. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, then head over to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I'll see you guys in the next one.